love, we're breathing. When I want all I could get, we're breathing. And we're breathing. Once was in, but now is out. A whisper, now a shout. To the left, now to the right. We don't save you tonight. We're breathing. We're breathing. We're breathing.
I can always remember being into music and interested in music. I've strong memories of my dad's record collection. So this must have been sort of the age of 5 or 6, I guess. So my family moved to the Middle East when I was quite young, and you used to be able to buy something called Thompson Originals, which were these dirt cheap pirate tapes that they sold in souks. And I remember buying hundreds of those because they were so cheap. So I guess that got me into different music and buying music and collecting music. So, but a bit hard to pinpoint in terms of what got me into music. So two other things as well. So I remember my grandmother had a harmonium. So those that don't know what a harmonium is, it's a very bad organ really, which you pedal. And I remember sort of playing around with that from quite a young age and just being fascinated by the sound that it made. And I was very lucky as well to have a really good piano teacher when I started learning the piano at the age of 7 or 8. So I think he was a particular inspiration as well.
And when I learned piano, I was a total git towards my piano teacher, so I apologise. And for me, similar really, there's always a lot of things that contribute to it. My dad was quite big into music, so mainly jazz, Rolling Stones, and a bit of krautrock in there, a band called Düsseldorf that he used to play in the car. Having an older brother, I think, was important because he's 5 years older than me, so I was very aware of music and music fashion from a young age. And I remember even, age of 6, 7, Special's Ghost Town single, I remember him having that, and some other more embarrassing ones. And I do remember a thing, I've said this before, at primary school, a particular lesson we did where the teacher asked us to write down the images that a piece of music would evoke. And I remember that lesson, and there was this one piece of music that I thought was really incredible, this electronic piece of music which I thought was really atmospheric, even though I didn't know what electronic music was. And that, I asked him what it was, and it was, after the lesson, he said it's a track called On the Run by Pink Floyd, and he lent me Dark Side of the Moon. And I'm not an enormous Pink Floyd fan or anything, but that was certainly very key in terms of realisation of how the power of music. I remember listening to On the Run a lot. I can answer that one very quickly. Absolutely none, essentially. I had first band was Cult and a Name. I used to do some stuff on my own. Throughout my teens and my 20s, I used to record on a little 4-track recorder and do very kind of indulgent, introspective songs on my own for the world never to hear, mostly. But it was very educational in retrospect because it really taught me about production and arrangement because I did everything myself. And I did do a few gigs on my own, which were pretty awful, really. But none. But John, on the other hand,
Eric's been very modest because I saw one of those early gigs with the ironing board.
the ironing board. Yeah.
In fact, that's sort of just before we got together as Cult No Name. In terms of what I'd been involved in, I was classically trained, so I started learning the piano from quite a young age. I guess originally played in orchestras, so actually my main instrument as I was growing up was the trombone, and the piano was sort of a bit secondary. Then the piano took over and I started, my first band was when I was 15, a band called Raging Calm, terrible name, and then just various bands and duos up until the point of Cult No Name, really. Nothing very successful though.
Didn't you have a band called Ochre that nearly got somewhere?
Yes, that was my university band, A Taste of Ochre. So equally terrible name. No, I mean, yeah, we would like to have thought that it was going some places, but not really. We were on the verge of going on a tour at one point, but like many bands, it just descended into a huge argument, and we broke up before we got anywhere. Not like Cult No Name, though.
Exactly. So we first met working at HMV. For those who don't, for a lot of people don't know what HMV is these days, the DVD retailer. But it was, so, kind of straight out of university, I wanted to work in a music shop, so I got a job in HMV, and I'd already been there for over a year, and John joined as a Christmas temp originally, I believe. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then, we went on, and I moved upstairs, so I started managing the jazz section, and John was managing the classical section, which is managing, a row of CDs 8 foot wide. We felt like managers, but I think it was a great time. It was a great time,
but we didn't really. We met first as friends, really. So I don't think we considered being in a band together when we were actually at HMV. Although we worked, we knew that we were both had a strong interest in music, and that we played music live, albeit for different things. But it was after HMV that we actually, I can't remember the exact moment of how that happened, but we sort of decided to do a track, didn't we, together?
Yeah, I kind of realised doing stuff on my own was just going nowhere, and I needed help. There's no point. I had a few. We did a cover to begin with, which was on a kind of a compilation. We weren't even called Cult No Name at that time. This was several years after we met, about 3-4 years after we met. And then I thought, that worked out all right. And so do you want to try it? I've got some songs here. Do you want to try these? And that's kind of how it started. But I do also remember that there was still a bit of a delay before the first gig, because there's little things like having a car to have gear that you can to shift gear around. We didn't have at that time. Neither of us could drive. Or maybe we could just about drive at that time. And there were sort of practical things that kind of got in the way in terms of doing the first gig. But we did play together for a while, and we built up, a kind of a few songs essentially.
Yeah, which, funnily enough, during lockdown, I went through my DATs. So I've got a collection of DATs. And those first sessions I found on DATs, I think we used to do things quite differently, which would involve me, us being in the same room all the time, but also recording me live on DAT, and then you effectively singing live as well. So it's quite interesting listening to those sort of early takes.
That is interesting. I'd forgotten we'd done it that way.
Yeah.
To be honest. But there you go. The technology, evolves, doesn't it? And you do things a different way, so it's interesting. So that's how it was. That's how CWNN essentially formed.
Great, actually, because it was the first, what I would deem as proper release of my life in that sense, which might make it sound very grand, but it was the first time that a record company had taken interest in us or anything that I've done previously, and to have that sort of endorsement from a record company and to have product in your hand was a very nice moment. And I think sort of that's repeated itself for each release. It's a very rewarding moment when you've gone through the recording process and then you have that end product in your hand, so it's always very enjoyable.
Yeah, I'd agree. I remember receiving the copies of our first album in the same building we are in now. I remember receiving it for the first time and being incredibly excited when I opened that box and you know, holding it in your hands and all that kind of stuff, because it almost felt like, because it was obviously my first release as well, felt like although we'd been on a little compilation before that, one track, but you know, it's the first release I had as well, so it was really a substantial moment. And in terms of the feeling of successive albums, it's always very exciting. I mean, I would say because of the way that music is released these days, it's a little bit less of a cliff edge when things get released these days, because you know they kind of burn more slowly, or the digital release might be a different date to the physical release. You know, the days of people, not anyone ever did that with CWNN, but the days of queuing up outside your local record shop on the day of release and all that kind of stuff, you know, and getting things the day that they're released are gone a little bit. So it's more gradual, I'd say, with successive releases, but it's always very exciting and a relief sometimes, because you put a lot of effort, heart and soul into what we do, and it's great it does feel like a literal release. You know, when that comes out, you feel you've let it go, and then off they go, these suite of songs, and you just wait to see what happens to them, really.
Bright-eyed boy who wants to take control, he's fought to rule us all. Rule the sun, he's going to lose the ones who just can't run anymore. And meanwhile, world grows older.
Okay, so post-punk electronic balladeers, I kind of just made that up really just to have something individual about us, and gradually over the years people have said that it's quite a good way of describing what we do, certainly electronic balladeers bit. In terms of where we fit in, I don't know what John thinks, I think we don't fit in. I know every band loves to talk about how they don't fit in, and it's a great badge of honour to claim you don't fit in, but CWNN do not fit in. And we've had that, I've had people tell me that right from the early days, or early gigs, you know, other bands saying you don't sound like anyone else. Not always a compliment, but there's something quite individual, I think, about what we do. You know, it didn't start out that way. You just do what you do, and then you realise, oh, okay, this seems to be different and reasonably unique, so we'll just carry on doing it. So I don't think we particularly fit in. And that's a good thing. It has its frustrations, I would say, because it means you're not part of the group, of the clan that some other bands might be. But ultimately, you just got to take pride in the music we do, and I can only think that's a good thing, really.
No, I totally agree. I don't think we've we fit in, and it's something that sort of struck me firstly when we gig. So since the beginning of when we gig, we've never quite sort of found our place as such. We never kind of sat that well in certain venues. We've sort of been kind of electro, kind of ballady, but not, never sat comfortably in either. I mean, I quite like the fact that we don't fit in. It's interesting sort of hearing some people who get quite frustrated sometimes that they can't box you as such. And that's sort of a comment on, I guess, how people do like to sort of box genres and styles, but I quite like the fact that we slightly buck that trend a bit, and that's not to sound pretentious about it, I just think it's happened.
And we, and also to do that without kind of darting around between, our sound is quite consistent, but it's still a little bit hard to pin down. And you're right, I mean, the early years, certainly, we used to split our time between acoustic singer-songwriter venues and kind of electro nights at like Madame Jojo's and places like that. And at either, you had some people that really liked us and some people that really hated us, because we didn't quite fit in either, perhaps. So yeah, another point I've forgotten now. But yeah, no, not fitting in is a good thing ultimately, I think.
It's pretty varied over the course of our history of as Cult With No Name, really. Some are quite predictable, so some are, I guess, flatteringly, some of our musical heroes. So, I've heard one of my big musical heroes is the Blue Nile. I've heard that said often about us. Also, a band that we both love and Eric introduced me to, the Nits, we've been compared to by those who know them. Anything from, so I've heard Scott Walker mentioned, particularly in the early days, more with Eric. Sometimes sort of more lazy comparisons, I guess, because we're a duo. The Pet Shop Boys has been mentioned quite a lot, although I don't think we particularly sound like the Pet Shop Boys. We have our moments maybe, but so anything and everything in between, really.
We do, and I guess that's part of the process of people finding it hard to pinpoint us. It's been very varied. A story I've mentioned in other interviews before is I remember within a couple of months of each other, we had one review that said we sounded like Gary Newman, or a particular track sounded like Gary Newman, and then another review that said we sounded like Randy Newman. I just thought that just beautifully summed it up, that you had two completely different artists that have no relation to each other whatsoever, apart from the surname rhyme. So we get very wide range of comparisons with some consistencies over the years, and that's I guess that's a good thing. I'm always fascinated to think, as John said, Scott Walker certainly at the beginning was an interesting one, and particularly interesting because I didn't really know who Scott Walker was at that time. So I'm a bit of a news junkie, that's for sure. And I think really, Cult With No Name songs are more sort of observational than anything else. They're not meant to be political. They're not supposed to influence people to take a particular view or to act in a particular way, mainly because I think music is a highly ineffective medium to do that. And musicians like to think that they change the world, but they don't change the world. Social workers, doctors, teachers, etc. They're the people that change the world, and I think we're quite grounded like that. So I'm very realistic about what a song can and cannot do. But yes, and I'm just very interested in the world. Often they're things that I just observe in terms of human response to certain situations. Sometimes they're quirky things that I've read. And I mustn't forget that quite a few songs, the song title comes first. So I have a sheet of paper where I write down ideas for songs and song titles, which are usually the Cult With No Name songs that are a bit more punny, have a bit more pun around them, tend to be the ones where the song title comes first, I understand. So that's kind of where I get that stuff from. And it's always good, of course, to be detached, to slightly detach yourself from what's going on, so you're able to kind of pick up on those things and write about them. So I try and have tried to maintain a healthy detachment as well as consuming news, etc. So I just like that. I tend to like songs with or an element of lighter music, or at least innocuous music, and darker lyrics, just because I think it's a bit more interesting, a bit more subtle. I don't like it, and you do get this in electronic music a lot, very direct, generic messaging, you know, particularly this kind of obsession with Teutonic influences, and kind of, I can say it's being German, I just find that just so predictable. And so I like the subtlety of a kind of dark message, but kind of delivering that in a variety of different ways. And there's some great examples of that I can think of. There's a song that I love called Scarred for Life by a band called Slap Happy, and I use that as a bit of a benchmark in terms of it's quite innocuous, quite melancholic, innocuous music, but incredibly dark, devastating lyrics, and I think that's just a really good example. And yeah, I just think it's a bit more interesting way of approaching things. You want to take that up for acoustic songs?
Yeah, sure. So I find it's interesting that Eric writes the songs on guitar. I didn't actually realise that he wrote songs on guitar, but I've only seen Eric play guitar a couple of times. I think it's only sort of when he started to bring the guitar around, which I think probably some of the later albums he started to do that I realised that. I mean, how it translates to keyboard is well, there's no sort of obvious answer to that. Eric will play the song through, and I will try and sort of start to think of ideas, and often before you've finished, and then it goes from there, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's very interesting sort of in terms of John's improvisational approach and all the rest of it, and not getting bored easily. Even before I finished playing the song on guitar, he will be playing along. We already have started stuff, and as we sort of said earlier, I might pick up on a riff here and there. Also, it's important to kind of record a very basic track quickly in case we forget it. Often, so that's important. So those are in terms of the more acoustic songs, and you know, something that John will add that I might then take away and build on. So we talked about Swept Away, you know, that kind of piano riff, that rising piano riff, you know, became the sort of riff in the song, which we kind of built on a little bit. With the more electronic numbers, it's a bit different. I mean, the arrangement's kind of halfway there when I take it to John, but obviously he adds the piano touches and the strings, and very importantly the atmospherics, which, you know, we'll perhaps come to, which kind of can take a song in a particular direction as well. And then again, what he does or sends back, or however it's returned, might then influence again the arrangement in some ways. I mean, there's Ruins was an interesting example of that.
Yes, so yeah, Ruins. So on our new album, that particular song took many phases, if you like, where it started off as one particular song was sent to me, and then I came up, and you'll hear this on the new album, came up with a string line or some ideas, and Eric kind of got it back to Eric, and he turned it on its head after that. So it's I think we said before that we never have a hard and fast idea of how songs are going to end up, but that particular song is a very good example, and I hope you enjoy it when you hear it, but of how songs do seem to evolve.
Yeah.
It seems to have happened more and more, actually, as some more albums have progressed.
Yeah, I think so, and we're not afraid to dump a song and start again if we're thinking it's not working, and that's a very important thing. You've got to be honest with yourself. So it's just not working, and because we said earlier you can arrange things in different ways, okay, we just approach it in a different way. So Ruins, we've approached another track, Bulletproof, we revisited as well, in terms of we halved the speed of it in terms of the arrangement. So there's it's some songs are quick, some songs take time, but a very little journey.
You're in my heart, you're are such a precious thing.
So that particular song is an example where the song title came first. I had this phrase, all I have is yours, including you. And I thought that's a really nice, I quite like that, that's quite a nice phrase. And I thought, what on earth can I write about that fits with that theme? And then I just thought about a domestic violence situation, domestic abuse situation, or at least the concept of women feeling empowered, or any person for that matter, and owning your own body, owning your own body, which is obviously part of that. So I just thought that lent itself to that kind of situation. It's probably the most extreme example of kind of lighter, innocuous kind of music and very dark lyrics, because the lyrics, if you look at them, are very dark in places. So I went to town a little bit there. And I thought it was important to get a female singer involved, so you have Serena Riley with those vocals on that with me, which I thought gave it a nice touch, if you like, as well. So was it hard to put myself in that character? I don't know really, you just kind of, the situation kind of just lends itself to certain kind of lyrical phrases, if you like. And it kind of went from there really. I don't think the lyrics took any longer than any other particular song that I can think of. I'll start with that one. So a friend of mine is a guy called Peter Bratz, who was in a band, a German punk band called Syph, S-Y-P-H, who I'm a big fan of, and I interviewed him many years ago, and we sort of became friends. And I used to, because he's a musical influence for me, I used to send him successive Cotton & Name albums, and used to really love them. And then I knew he's a filmmaker these days, a very well-known filmmaker, and I knew that he'd worked with David Lynch on the set of Blue Velvet, and he was invited by David Lynch to kind of record and document the making of it. And I also knew that he did a little obscure avant-garde film in 1988 based on that footage, but I know most of it was never used. And the story is basically, he one day was in his studio and he was listening to one of our albums, actually a track that John wrote, ostensibly called As Below, it's called As Below, isn't it? Yeah, As Below, and that came on, and he thought, this music is perfect for my footage, my Blue Velvet footage, most of which, is just lying around, and wouldn't it be great to do a new film, but based around that footage? And he basically said that, and he put together a trailer to that track, As Below, based on some of that footage, to get funding for the film. And we waited quite a long time, and we didn't think we got the funding, but in the end we got the money to make the film. And then he immediately came to us and said, well, because this all started with one of your tracks, can you make the soundtrack first? I want to edit the footage, I want to edit all the footage that I've got to the music. And that was amazing, because you're not normally in a position to be able to do that with the soundtrack. Normally the soundtrack's the last thing that happens. And we realised that we're going to need some help with this, because we need some acoustic instrumentation in there. So we called on our friends Tuxedo Moon, who we work with, for a band that I'm a huge fan of and are amazing. And also it tied in because one of the members of Tuxedo Moon plays on that track, As Below. Luke Van Lieshout is a brilliant performer, a brilliant musician. So just made perfect sense. And we also invited John Fox because I thought that would be cool, having known John Fox a bit, and I knew that Peter Bratz was a big fan of John Fox, or early Ultravox anyway, so he was very excited about that prospect, and that's kind of how it came about. Anything you want to add?
I mean, just that I think we were very fortunate. I don't think it will happen again like this, but to be told to, in effect, write a soundtrack before the film's made and just do what you've done before, essentially, albeit with extra musicians on. It was a joy to be involved in, really, and actually quite easy to be involved in. And I think Peter's instincts must have been right, because what ended up, well, we didn't really try to fit it to any imagery, did we? But what ended up, actually, I know, to say it ourselves, it actually worked pretty well, I think.
It was amazing, the trust he put in us, and it was surprisingly easy. We didn't know how it was going to be working with, but to be in that position, for me personally, Tuxedo Moon being, a big influence, one of my favourite bands, certainly in my 20s, and being told, okay, just go away and make an album with one of your favourite bands, so, okay, and be paid to do it. With no real, other than that template, he just basically said, can you just make 90 minutes of music that sounds a bit like As Below? Really, that was pretty much
what we did.
Totally.
Pretty much.
Totally.
I'd say. Although we did take things in a little bit of a different direction.
Yeah,
I think that was some of the other musicians involved really helped with that. Obviously, they were a big part of it.
Yeah, totally. It was very 50-50 as well. I'd say there's more of us in there than perhaps Tuxedo Moon, but in terms of the initial generation of the songs, how they were initially generated, was certainly very 50-50. So it was a total joy, really, and that's how Blue Velvet Revisited came out. And then the film, what was great about the soundtrack is it's had so many lives, because the soundtrack actually came out a year before the film, got loads and loads of press. The film came out, get loads and loads of press, went all around the world for 2 years, then came out on DVD at David Lynch's request, and then a track was used in a TV show. So it's had this amazing journey, so it's been fantastic.
Well, with that particular soundtrack, the label that we were signed to at the time, a label called Trackworks, based in LA, they one of the things they did was soundtracks, but release soundtracks in effect to silent movies and old movies, and they very generously at the time, I think I'm getting this right, Eric, very generously at the time gave us the opportunity to do the same, really. We hadn't, they'd heard instrumentals that we'd done, and in fact, that was how they signed us originally, I think, was by us contributing an instrumental to
Three.
The back, 3 instrumentals to the back of 17 Pygmies. But the soundtrack itself, I think we picked the film. Did they pick the film?
They picked
the film.
Yeah.
And just said, go for it, really. Just record what you will. So there were no constraints at all around it, and it was. I think we found it quite a liberating experience, because we'd done nothing like that before, and actually, it's one of my favourite Cult of No Name moments. Really, the end project, it came out really well.
Yeah, and also in terms of you working well under pressure, we didn't have long to do it in. I think they gave us like 2 months or something, and I was quite astonished with the stuff that you came up with in that time. Some of the best instrumental stuff I think you've done, and I think it was John's idea to throw in a couple of songs actually, because there's always obviously songs lying about, and I said, well, we could put, and I was a bit 50-50 with it. He said, yeah, I think we should put a couple of songs in because it makes it a bit different. So I'm glad we did. And things like Under the Dirt has become quite a Cult of the Name classic. That was a very enjoyable experience. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, no, the songs really, really add to it, and actually one of my favourite sets of lyrics, Under the Dirt.
Is it?
Yeah, fantastic. So.
Well, that was a song I had, and I rewrote the lyrics. I had the title and I had the lyrics about something else, which I should talk about another time what it was about. But I just rewrote the lyrics to fit in a little bit with the film. A bit like And Dreams Where I Wake Up, which is an overlooked song for me, and Cult of No Name's canon. Again, I had that song and I completely rewrote the lyrics to fit a little bit with the theme of the film. So that's how it came about, Caligari.
I see the prize, your prying eyes, I know. I'll reach out and I won't let go. down, through town to town, I'll pass until it's firmly in my grasp. So come put your trust in me.